All right, Mikhail Nehemievich Tal, the magician of Riga, so-called. He was born in Riga, Latvia, November 9th, 1936. He passed away June 28th, 1992. He won his first Latvian championship in 1953, so he would have been, 17 at the time. In 57, age 20, he became the youngest ever Soviet champion. And then in 1960, following a string of victories in strong tournaments, including a second consecutive Soviet championship, this event here at Portoroz, and then he also won the candidates in Yugoslavia. He became the youngest world champion ever with a victory over Mikhail in the world championship match. That record was broken by Garry Kasparov in 1985. But Mikhail Tal suffered from poor health, and he consequently lost the rematch. Botvinnik regained the title in 61, and Tal never again managed to qualify for a world championship match. He continued to struggle with health problems for the remainder of his career and life. Therefore, his career was marked by inconsistent results after that. But he was occasionally still able to achieve world-class success, adding 4 more Soviet championships to his resume, which equaled the record held by Botvinnik of 6. In 79, he tied for first place with Anatoly Karpov at Montreal and managed to climb back to number 2 in the world in the rankings. He was the 3rd player ever to break the 2,700 rating barrier, and in 1988 he became World Blitz champion. Sadly, he died of renal failure in 1992, only 55 at the time of his death. So we start the game with e4 and e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, is the Ruy Lopez opening, and a6 is Paul Morphy's defense. Bishop a4 is the Columbus variation. Knight f6, castles, and I'm sure you already know that bishop e7 is the closed Spanish. Rook e1, b5, bishop b3, castles. Pawn h3, pawn d6, pawn c3 is Palkadis's variation. Knight d7, and d4, speaking of Karpov, d4 is Anatoly Karpov's variation, although it would not have been known by that name when this was played, because Karpov was yet to arrive on the scene. Knight b6, and here, pawn takes the pawn. Now, let me just say a word about the ideal pawn center. You see this gets marked with an inaccuracy. It's usually best to keep the ideal pawn center intact until you're fully developed, unless, of course, you're compelled to break it by your opponent. Now, you might recall that this exact position was reached in the game against Bronstein. I think we covered that last week, didn't we? In that game, Bobby played bishop e3. But the book move is queen's knight to d2, bishop f6, knight f1. And the most popular continuation is rook e8 right here. So coming back, Bobby playing pawn takes the pawn. Now knight takes the pawn, knight takes the knight, pawn takes the knight, and queen h5. Queen d6 here. Knight d2, and bishop e6 is played right here. The bot calling for queen g6. Note, a lot of times we like to push this g-pawn, but it's not the best here. It creates weaknesses on these squares unnecessarily, and then you have to come back to e2 or f3, one or the other. Bishop e6 will be played, etc. Coming back, let's talk about queen g6. That's the best move, hitting our queen, and it also vacates d6 so the bishop can come here at the right moment if necessary. Or perhaps he might want to come here in certain situations. All right, anyway, bishop e6 was played by Mikhail Tal, and knight to f3. Bishop takes bishop, pawn takes bishop, knight d7, pawn b4, king's rook to d8, bishop g5, and that bishop g5 makes way for the rook to come to d1 and hit the queen. But apparently bishop e3 is the better way to accomplish that task. Pawn f6 is played here, bishop to e3 now, and queen e6. And again, we're seeing very few derogatory marks from the annotator so far. Now king's rook to d1, pawn c5, knight h4, bishop f8, knight f5, and then the threat here is queen g4. So now g6 is played, queen g4 pins the pawn to the king, king f7. Now knight h6. That gets the big red X. So yeah, the bot calling for b takes c5, and that vacates b4, so your backward b-man can come on up here. And of course, this threat is going to be immense. This passed pawn becomes a very strong fighter. So that's a good move, isn't it? I actually was just thinking about queen h4. This is undefended, so that would be very interesting. Oh, what? Ficklebot teased me. Started with a double exclam, then downgraded me. That was not nice, Ficklebot. Not nice at all. All right, anyway, knight h6, bishop takes knight, queen takes queen, check, king takes queen, now bishop takes the bishop. C takes b4. It's interesting, he might be able to trap this bishop behind enemy lines, and I'm not sure how he would exploit it, but he might be able to do it. Anyway, pawn takes the pawn here, king's rook to c8, bishop e3, rook c4 here, rook d2, rook takes b4, which is better than rook takes e4. On rook takes e4, we're going to have a doubling of white's rooks, queen's rook to d1, and that battery attacks the knight. So the knight would have to move, and then you can play check right here, and the king would have to move. Let's go king f7, because bishop to, yeah, it says king e7, but the reason I didn't choose king e7 is because of this. Back, back, back. Point I was trying to make, though, is that taking this pawn is better than taking that one. Anyway, the rooks are doubled in either case, and the knight has to go to f8 anyway, and we give the check anyway. And now king to f7. Rook b6 is played, and rook takes the b-man. Now, ironically, whereas that wasn't the best move before, I believe it is the best move now. And the reason I believe, okay, the bot says rook to e8 is the best move. But the reason I like this move is to make this square safe, so that at some juncture, if the king needs to, he can come here, or you can just push your pawn, something like that. Or if he moves up here, we can come here and here, like rook b7, for example. Yeah, no. Well, yeah, I guess you could. You could do it. I'm just wondering if I should hide back in the backfield, but you might be able, it might be either way. Let's see. Let's see what we get on h1. No, it gets a question mark. Yeah, you got to be careful at this juncture not to get out in front of your troops. There's too many guys here yet. All right, anyway, back. So rook takes the pawn. My only point, though, is getting rid of this pawn makes that square safe. And yeah, at least f5 is enabled in that line. All right, the rook on d1 goes to d6, threatening the f-man by a battery attack. Apparently rook b7. Yeah, rook b7's more active. If king e8, there's a self-mate there, a forced checkmate. If he goes here, oh no, it's not. Am I wrong? I'll play bishop c5, and this is checkmate here. Oh, he can actually move his knight here, and then I'll be blocking my own bishop. Yeah, okay. If he leaves the knight there, it's checkmate, but he'd have to come here, wouldn't he? But now I'm winning material, right? I'm winning the knight with check, because it's a discovered hit. So, bada bing, bada boom. Okay, so yeah, so he'd have to play the king here. That's my point. And now rook d6 can still be played, can't it? Or even better, maybe here. Oh, nope, I should have stuck with my first idea. Okay, should have been satisfied with my first brain. My first brain can't talk. Right, well, a5, that gets a question mark, with rook c2 being indicated. I thought king g8 might be the safest bet here. I get a star for that. I think the reason the bot likes rook c2 is it wants to defend the 7th rank with rook c7, probably, giving this rook a defensive role. All right, a5, rook b7 check, king g8, rook takes f6. That gets a question mark. Bishop h6 preferable. Bishop h6, and and then either of these pieces can come to the G7 square. The point of the bishop coming here is this attack, and the point of the rook coming here is obviously to put pressure there on the king and force him into the corner. But rook takes the pawn, and rook e8 gets a big red X. I'm sure you know the purpose of rook e8. He wants to be able to extricate his knight on e6. But once again, the bot calling for rook c2. No doubt to retreat the rook to the 8th rank for defensive purposes. All right, rook e8 was played, and Bobby with rook ff7. And that gets a big red X. Pigs on the 7th, very desirable. Now, why rook a6? Well, the point of rook a6 is that you have vacated this square, the f6 square, for your bishop. Southern Run subbing with Prime for the 4th time. Thank you, Southern Run. And that's a reminder to all of our viewers that if you are an Amazon Prime member, you can use your Prime Gaming at no extra charge. It comes with Amazon Prime. If you have not set up Prime Gaming, head over to Amazon.com, type Prime Gaming in the search bar, and follow the on-screen instructions. And with that Prime Gaming membership, you can subscribe to the Twitch channel of your choice once each and every month. And since there's no channel like this channel anywhere near this channel, this must be the channel, Amazon Prime. Sign up for Prime Gaming now and support this guy. Oh yeah. So I was just saying, the point of rook a6 is to vacate f6 so your bishop can come up and plant himself on that square. And it also hits the a-man, and you can still get pigs on the 7th. But rook ff7, hard to resist. Knight e6 is played, preventing rook g7. That does give black a smidge of initiative, doesn't it? But rook takes the pawn. Rook takes pawn is going to facilitate a hit on the other pawn. I guess the reason it's calling for rook a7 is to prevent black from playing his rook to a8. And then we can get both rooks behind the passed pawns, because after all, rooks belong behind passed pawns. Instead, Bobby grabbed the pawn, and a4 was played. Now rook a7 comes. Rook a8. What? Is that right? Oh, yeah, because the king's attacking my rook. Rook a8, putting the question there. Rook h to g7. Gets Bobby a double exclam. Check. King h8. The point here is if you take here, I take you there with check. So king h8, Bobby gives him check, he comes back, Bobby comes back, and gets another double exclam. And the player said, well, one more time and it's a repetition, so let's save ourselves the time and call it a draw because we have both satisfied the time control. Pretty competitive game, 41 moves. Bobby played the opening well, but Mikhail was on another level in the opening. Both players with an incredible middle game. And Bobby's accuracy, 95.3. Tal's accuracy, 95.5. Both players scoring a single game rating of 2,900. How do you like those apples? Those are good apples.